In the early 1990s, when the Canadian HIV Trials Network, or the CTN, began, AIDS was a death sentence. No one knew much about HIV. There were few drugs available. People with AIDS were desperate for treatment. We lacked medication for the myriad opportunistic infections that afflicted us. Young people, mainly men in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, were wasting away and dying like tortured flies. Stigma and discrimination were the norm. It hadn't been long since quarantine had been proposed. People were denied jobs, denied housing, denied dental care, denied daycare for their children, and even denied embalming after their death. Parents turned their sons away, sometimes because they were gay, sometimes because of the shame of AIDS. Given this ignorance-driven hysteria, it was important to us in the HIV community that researchers like Martin Schechter treated us like partners, not pariahs. Marty was one of the founding directors of the Canadian HIV Trials Network and also was the founding president of the Canadian Association for HIV Research. He reached out to the affected community, especially people living with HIV and AIDS, and activists. Marty had the vision and pragmatism to realize that we were stronger working together. We, the activists, would battle to get the researchers the funding they needed, and the researchers in turn supported us in our fight to secure AIDS prevention, care, and support programs across Canada. The CTN opened its doors in 1991. By 1992, there was community representation on its steering committee with Sean Hossain and on its scientific review committee with Kalpesh Oza. This was unprecedented in Canada. Then, during a public forum in Vancouver, Marty was challenged by a community member, Paula Breitstein, to form a community committee at the CTN that had the power to review scientific protocols and consent forms of clinical drug trials. Marty simply said, "Yes, that's a good idea. We're going to do that." Little did he realize at the time how novel this was and how upsetting it would be to the pharmaceutical industry. Marty really went to bat with the drug companies to allow community members to see their secret protocols. This changed the whole power structure between researchers, pharmaceutical companies, and people with HIV. The founding members of the Community Advisory Committee, who came from across the country in 1993, were recommended by the Canadian AIDS Society, Canadian Hemophilia, AIDS Action Now, and I was from Voices of Positive Women. We had a steep learning curve to plow our way through the thick trial protocols for semi-annual meetings and interim teleconferences. The day-long meetings were grueling for us, especially since most of us were seriously immunocompromised. We were supported by Martin and his staff at the CTN, Jackie Sass, Robin Sussel, and Bob O'Neill, who never treated us with anything except respect and compassion. I myself developed what was known as full-blown AIDS while I was chair of the Community Advisory Committee. I got PCP, and even worse, a fungal infection of the lungs, pulmonary aspergillosis. I was virtually bedridden and close to death. Some days I felt as if I were lying at the gates of hell. Yet I still dragged myself to a semi-annual meeting in Ottawa. Vomiting and feverish because of low hemoglobin, I chaired the Community Advisory Committee meeting, and I attended the steering committee 2 days later, because that's what AIDS activists did back then. 6 months later, I started on Azathioine 3TC and began a phoenix-like recovery. Some of my companions on the Community Advisory Committee weren't so lucky. When the first protease inhibitor, sequinavir, was made available on a compassionate basis, there wasn't enough of the drug to meet the worldwide demand. Roche Pharmaceuticals approached the CTN to help resolve this difficulty in Canada. Because the Community Advisory Committee existed, we were in a position to provide advice to Roche on the distribution of the drug. An ad hoc subcommittee of the Community Advisory Committee was formed, and a few of us met for a day to thrash out how best to allocate the drugs. We didn't want to use a lottery like they were doing in the United States. Instead, we decided to give the supply to the sickest patients first. Those who would likely die before the production ramped up would get it first. Ironically, while none of us on the committee qualified to get the drug under the criteria we set, half of our members died before the drug became available. 3 out of 6 died within 3 months in 1995. Claude Lachapelle on May 1st, Kalpesh Oza on June 4th, and Laurel Dehaan on July 29th. Despite this tragic decimation of the Community Advisory Committee, we brought in new members and kept on fighting. Martin embraced the idea that the CTN had the obligation to train community members to review protocols and consent forms, rather than leaving it to the HIV community groups or the individuals themselves to muddle along. This was also pivotal in the evolution of an effective community of voice, especially as our original members died or left the committee. As National Director of the CTN, Marty helped to bring together researchers from across Canada to study pressing issues related to the health of HIV-positive people. These included not only trials of antiretroviral drugs, but also treatments for opportunistic infections such as PCP, MAC, CMV, and toxoplasmosis. The CTN became an integral part of the Canadian effort to improve the lives of people with HIV. In 1996, the CTN even facilitated the first Canadian guidelines for the use of antiretroviral therapy and ensured that community members were part of that process, allowing the voice of people with HIV to be heard by the researchers, by government, by media, creating a platform for us to be heard and to be given credence, set a precedent for other disease groups. Martin's work really was at the forefront of a whole empowerment of the patient, really, not just in HIV, but in other fields as well. He certainly has a long history of involving the community, and he also has a long history of speaking out for the benefit of the HIV community. We had battle after battle to fight. Unfortunately, many of our battles were against the drug companies, were against the government, trying to either obtain more funding or maintain the funding that we had that they were threatening to take away. And Martin was really a partner with us all through those fights, and really was someone we could rely on. And he was also somebody who encouraged us to keep fighting, to try to ensure that we had the funding that we needed for research in Canada.